Why dost thou strive against him? For he gives not account of any of his matters. The words are a reproving question, as if he had said, You do ill, very ill to strive. There is a fourfold striving, three of which are held forth in Scripture under the word of the text. First, there is a striving with outward force and power, either personally, man with man, properly called contention, or more generally, nation with nation, properly called war. Secondly, there is a legal striving, a striving by way of plea about matters of right and title. The word in the text chiefly imports such a judiciary striving, a strife in law when the adverse party or plaintiff pleads and commences his suit against the defendant. Striving is taken in this sense and joined with warring in the description of the contest which Jephthah had with the king of the children of Ammon, Judges 11:25. And now are you anything better than Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab? Did he ever strive against Israel, or did he ever fight against them? That is, did he either make war with Israel, or did he so much as challenge and plead his right to their land by law? The other name which Joash, Gideon's father, occasionally gave him in Judges 6:31 and 32, takes part from this word. Therefore on that day he called him Jerubbaal, saying, Let Baal plead against him, because he hath thrown down his altar. As if he had said, Let Baal come and enter his action against my son if he please, and let my son alone to answer him. Thirdly, there is a logical striving, or a striving by dint of argument and reason. Thus dispute and strive, and books of controversy about matters of faith and worship are called books of polemical divinity. Nor indeed has any kind of strife been carried on with higher and hotter animosities than those managed by tongue and pen in writing and disputing. Fourthly, the word is applied to any angry, passionate chiding and complaining. So it is used in that famous history in Exodus 17, where the people of Israel, having journeyed from sin and pitched in Rephidim, verse 1, did chide with Moses, from which act, verse 7, he called the place Massah and Meribah, because of the chiding of the children of Israel, and because they tempted the Lord, saying, Is the Lord among us or not? Because the people of Israel strove with Moses, or rather with God himself, therefore to keep them under the fence of this sin and provocation, Moses called the name of the place Meribah, which signifies striving. In this last sense, as striving is used by way of chiding and complaining, we are to understand it here. Why do you strive against him, saith Elihu? That is, why do you chide and complain about the dealings of God with you, or because he will not render you a reason of his dealings with you in this affliction? Job made many striving and chiding complaints. His first were eminently such, chapter 3:11. Why did I not die from the womb? Why did I not give up the ghost when I came out of the belly? Why did the knees prevent me, or why the breast, that I should suck? He chides hard about the hardness of his condition in this life, who chides because he lives. Read him in the same language in chapter 10:18, and in a language not much unlike it in several other places. Yea, Job does, I say not formally, yet virtually, call out or challenge God more than once to plead with him and make good his cause against him. Why do you strive with him? For he gives no account of his matters. The word signifies properly to answer, and so the text might well enough be rendered here out of the original. He answers not. Mr. Broughton saith, he will not speak for all his dealings. If any man demand of God a reason of his doings, he may choose whether he will give it him or not. He will not be brought to a reckoning. He needs not to answer or give an account of any of his manners, or of any of his words. It is frequent in the Hebrew to express manners or things by this word, which in strictness signifies but a word. Chapter 19:28. Seeing the root of the matter, the text is the root of the word, is found in me. So here he gives not account of any of his words or manners. Again, the original says he gives not account of all his manners. We translate full and right to the sense when we say he gives not account of any of his matters. For the meaning of Elihu is not that God gives an account of some, though that be a truth, but not indeed of all his manners. He has some reserved cases and counsels, but his meaning is that he is not obliged to give any man an account of so much as of any of his manners. And then, that universal is to be taken distributively, all for any. So we render it in Psalm 147:20, where the psalmist, showing the special privileges of God's people, saith, He is not dealt so with all nations. We translate more emphatically, He is not dealt so with any nation. God was so far from giving the same privilege to all nations, which he gave to his Israel, that he gave not the same to any nation, as if he had said, God has honored his peculiar people with peculiar favors. Go inquire and search all the nations of the world, and ye shall not pick out a people upon whom God has bestowed such rich and precious mercies as he has upon Israel. And to this day the Israel of God in every nation enjoys such spiritual privileges and mercies as the nations with whom they are civilly mingled know not of. But to the point, so here, he gives not account of all, that is, not of any of his matters. Most of the Greek translators render, according to the strictness of the letter, not matter, but words. Why do you strive with him? For his words are such as to which none can answer. As if the meaning of Elihu were, when God speaks, no man is able to reply upon him, or contradict him. His sayings are indeed irrefutable. Thus, they gloss their translation, why do you call him into judgment, or strive with him? For all his speeches are such as cannot be contradicted. If God oppose, who can answer? If God answer, who can oppose him? That's a good sense, though not a good translation. Some others interpret the latter part of the verse as containing Job's answer to the question put by Elihu in the first part of it. Why do you strive with God, saith Elihu? To which Job is supposed replying, because he gives me not an account of my matters. God does not answer to my words, and therefore pardon me if I complain or strive with him. I hope while I am thus unanswered, you will hold me excused if I move again and again, yea, even strive for an answer. But the grammar of the text is against this reading, the words being plainly in the third person, his matters, not in the first, my matters, and it is too great a boldness with the text to make such a change in the translation. Besides, it is more agreeable to the scope of the place to take the latter part of the verse as a reason given by Elihu why Job should not strive with God, than to take it as a reason given by Job why he did. I find a learned translator among the moderns who, taking the latter part of the verse as a reason given by Job of his striving with God, spoken of in the first, yet keeps to the third person. Why do you strive with him? Because he will not give an answer or an account of all his manners. As if Elihu had said, I plainly perceive the cause why you, O Job, are so unquiet, and still persist striving with God. It is even because he does not answer your so often repeated desire to summon your appearance before him, and then to give you an account of his proceedings with you. But consider, man, are you well in your wits? Know you not what you do or say? Will you, a poor, narrow-hearted creature, take it ill at the hands of the great God, as if it were to strive with him, because he does not render a reason of all his manners, and expound all his doings to you? The argument may be formed thus. He is not just or right who strives with God, because God does not give him a reason of all his actions and administrations. But you seem to strive with God because he is not giving you an account or reason of his administrations towards you. Therefore, you are not just. This is a fair and proper sense, yet I shall keep to our reading and make this latter part of the verse as a ground or reason given by Elihu why Job ought not to strive with God, as those two other readings make it a reason why he did. As if Elihu had said, why do you strive against him? Consider, as God is greater than man, so he is absolute in his greatness, or his is a sovereign greatness. For he gives not account of any of his manners. This I conceive the best and clearest rendering of these words, which, thus understood, yields us several useful observations. First, upon the whole matter, thus. Gracious men do not always hold out the same gracious frame of spirit. There was a time when Job was far from striving with God. far from doing or speaking anything which had the least shadow or savour of it. Time was when Job was altogether for and in submitting to God. Let God do what he will with him, he had not a word to say against him. After all the sad reports and messages which were brought to him of the devastation of his whole estate in the field, yea, of the disastrous death of all his children in one day and at once, did Job strive with God? Did he utter one word of complaint or so much as of any dissatisfaction? No, not one, but gave glory by this confession, the Lord has given and the Lord has taken. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Was not here a clear yielding of himself up to God to do what he would with him? Did he not freely lay himself low when God had laid him at the lowest? Who ever heard or read of a more perfect work of patience in a mere mortal man? Yet in the process of this busyness, Job did not only speak such words as carried a shadow of striving with God, but were real strivings and uncomely pleadings with him. His heart did not retain that first sweet submissive frame throughout the affliction, which appeared to admiration at the beginning of it. The state of grace abides always. It is not, as some affirm, losable. It is not like the best things of this world, perishing. But though a state of grace abides always, yet every man's grace, if any man's, does not always abide in the same state. A true frame of grace shall never be destroyed, but the heart of a gracious man does not always continue in the same frame. The heat of grace may be cooled, the height of it abated, the strength of it weakened, and the beauty of it faded. He that a while ago walked and acted very humbly may upon another temptation act very proudly, and walk as if he were above all his brethren. He that one while has acted very self-denyingly may at another time act very self-seekingly. He that has acted very lovingly, the very law of love being stamped upon his words and works, may at another time act very unlovely and lovelessly, and do things which are very much beside and below, yea, contrary to the fulfilling of that royal law. He may be so far from bearing his brother's burden, which is the fulfilling of the law of Christ, Galatians 6:2, that he may be a burden to his brother, and while at one time you might have done and spoken almost what you would to him, and could have borne it, at another time do what you can or speak what you can, he is offended. Such changes and varieties are found upon the most gracious frames of spirit which the best of saints have in this world. We have only this to hold to, the state of grace is unchangeable, and we are waiting for such a frame of grace as shall never change. That gracious frame in which the hand of God will set us up in the day of our resurrection to glory shall never change, nor decline a hair's breadth to all eternity. We shall be as pure and as holy and as spiritual and as heavenly and as meek and as full of the praise of God forever as ever, as full to eternity as in the very first moments in which that glorious frame shall be set up. But in this life, to how great a degree of grace soever we attain, we seldom retain the same degree, but are flowing and ebbing like the water, waxing and waning like the moon. Job was found striving with God, who a little before had so humbly submitted and was so fully resigned to him. Secondly, observe, there is a spirit in man very apt to strive with God. Do you think, saith the apostle in James 4:5, that the Scripture saith in vain, the spirit that dwells in us lusteth to envy? Or as the margin has it, enviously? Surely no, the Scripture does not speak this in vain, and if any think it does, their thoughts are vain. Now, as there are lustings in men to envy against their brethren because of the gifts and good things of God which they enjoy, so there are lustings in men to discontent against God because of the evils which they themselves suffer. When God seems to contend with us, we really fall to contending with God. The waters of Meribah will be an everlasting witness of this, of which Moses said in Numbers 20:13, this is a water of Meribah, because the children of Israel strove with the Lord, and he was sanctified in them. The apostle does more than intimate this readiness of man to strive with God, while by a vehement expostulation he checks it and reproves all men for it, 1 Corinthians 10:22. Do we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than he? They presume much upon their strength, who are forward to strive, they especially who provoke and challenge others to strive with them. There is a spirit in man which doubts it with God. even to a provocation of strife with him. But you will say, when may we be said to strive with God? I answer, we do it these 4 ways. First, man strives with God by disobeying his commands. That's a strife with his holiness. While disobedience is an unanswerableness to the law, willful disobedience is a making void the law. He that is resolved to sin wishes there were no law to stop him from sinning, or to punish him when he has sinned. What greater strife can be raised against a lawgiver than to wish he had given no such law? Secondly, men strive with God by not believing or distrusting his promises. That's a strife with his faithfulness, or with his power. Unbelief is one of the worst ways, if not the worst of all the ways of striving with God. The reason why that place at the rock in Horeb was called Meribah, Exodus 17:7, was because the people did not believe. They thought they must die with thirst in the wilderness when they saw no water. They failed to descend again a second time upon the like occasion while they abode in Kadesh. Numbers 21-3. And as the people strove there with God by their rebellious unbelief, so also did Moses and Aaron by their unbelief, that God would give water to such rebels, as it follows in the same chapter, verses 10, 11, and 12. There is no sin so often or so properly called a provocation as unbelief is. Yea, by unbelief we strive so much with God that we are said to weary him, Isaiah 7:13. Oh, how do they weary God, who either think him so weak that he cannot, or so unfaithful that he will not make good his word, or perform his promises. The first of these is always in unbelief, the latter often. Thirdly, we strive with God by not bearing his hand, or by our impatience under the cross which his hand lays upon us. While we quarrel with the rod, we quarrel with God, who chastens us with it. This is the most special way in which Job strove with God, and the sinfulness of it has been several times touched upon in this book. Fourthly, any murmuring word about, yea, any discontented thought with our own condition, though not vented by words, though it be kept in, and lie close in the bosom, is a striving with God. And so likewise is any tumultuating thought about his providence towards others and his stating of affairs in the world. Now as there is such a sinful principle in man to strive with God, so considering, as has been showed, how many ways it works, and many more ways of its working might be showed, this I say being considered, we may be found striving with God before we think of it, yea, while we oppose the very thought of it. Therefore, as Gamaliel warned the Jews, saying in Acts 5:39, take heed what ye do, lest haply ye be found even to fight against God. Those Jews did not think their opposing the messengers and ministers of Christ was a fighting against God, but Gamaliel told them plainly it was. So in many other cases we may do and say that which brings us under the same charge of striving with or against God, though we have no purpose, as Job had not, to strive with him. Again, as this text shows us Job striving with God, so it shows us Elihu striving with or questioning Job about it. This question or expostulation, why do you strive with him, was a chiding severe reproof of him for doing so. Hence note, for man to strive with God is most uncomely. Does it suit the condition or become the state of man to do it? It does not become a man as a creature to strive with God, much less as a new creature, as a professed servant of God, as a saint, as a Christian. We never act so unlike either creatures or new creatures, saints and Christians, as when we strive with God. It is a shame for a child to strive with his father, or for a servant to strive with his master. How much more for a creature to strive with his Creator, man, with God. Fourthly, the rebuke which Elihu gave Job did not only import the uncomeliness of his striving with God, but the sinfulness of it. So note, to strive with God in any of those ways before described is a sin exceeding sinful. How extremely sinful is it for man to strive with God appears by all the relative duties of man to God. Every servant and son of God is bound first to submit to God. Is it not exceeding sinful to strive where we ought to submit? Secondly, every godly man by these relations to God is bound to be content with, which is more than barely to submit to, all his dealings. Do not they sin who instead of being content strive with God because he deals so with them? Thirdly, man ought not only to be content, but to be well pleased with what God does. How far are they departed from a well-pleasedness with God who strive against him, which is an act of high displeasure. It is said of David in 2 Samuel 3:36, whatsoever the king did pleased all the people. The people did not say to David their king, do what you will, we will be pleased with it. But David was so gracious a prince, so good a king, that he did nothing that was justly displeasing to the people. It is more than comes to the share of a man, though a king, to say, let him do what he will, we will be pleased with it. But it is certainly our duty to say to God, do what you will, do your pleasure with us, and to us we will, through grace, be pleased with it. Is it not very sinful to strive with him about anything he does, in and with all whose doings we ought to acquiesce and be well pleased? Fifthly, these words, why do you strive with him, import a high presumption in those who do so. As observed, striving with God is a presumptuous sin. The prophet says in Isaiah 45:9, woe unto him that strives with his Maker. Let the potsherd strive with the potsherds of the earth. Shall the clay say to him that fashions it, what makest thou? Or thy work? He hath no hands. When the prophet says, let the potsherd strive with the potsherds of the earth, his meaning is, let man strive with man, but let not any man, presume to strive with his Maker. For then the potsherd strives with the potter, in all which he does not encourage man to strive with man, though his match, but shows how insufferable the boldness it is for any man, how matchless soever among men, to strive with God. The king of Judah, having sent a challenge to the king of Israel, he returned this answer in 2 Kings 4, verse 9. The thistle that was in Lebanon sent to the cedar that was in Lebanon, and so on, as if he had said, what a presumption is it for a thistle to equal itself with the cedar? And therefore he advises in verse 10, you have indeed smitten Edom, and your heart has lifted you up. Glory of this, and tarry at home, for why should you meddle to your hurt, that you should fall, you and Judah with you? As if he had said, you can get nothing by meddling with me but blows, and most probably your own ruin to boot. Now if an earthly king shall look upon it as a presumption for another king, his equal in dignity, to contend with him, how much more may the God of heaven, who is King of kings and Lord of lords, count it in high presumption for any man, though the greatest king on earth, to strive with him? Sixthly, we used to say to those who act foolishly, why do you thus? And therefore when Elihu saith to Job, why do you strive against him? We learn, striving with God is a foolish and a most irrational thing. Sinners are fools. All sin is folly. Irrationality is stamped upon every sin. Striving with God is a sin so eminently foolish as may carry away the bell. For foolishness, from all other sins, I will give you 3 things to show why it must needs be so. First, we cannot help ourselves by striving with God. Christ argues the folly of inordinate cares from this ground, Matthew 6:27. Which of you by taking thought can add 1 cubit unto his stature? It is not man's care, but the presence and blessing of God, which increases both the stature of man and his estate. Cares may break our sleep, yea, break our hearts, but they cannot fill our purses, nor heighten our persons, either in a natural or in a civil notion. Is it not then a foolish thing to take inordinate care? Is it not greater folly to strive with God? Seeing as by caring you cannot get any of the good things of the world, so by striving with God you cannot get off any of those evils which he lays upon you. Secondly, is it not a very foolish thing to strive with God, seeing we are so far from helping ourselves out of trouble by it, that we do but increase our trouble, and the more entangle ourselves by it? What do we by struggling but straighten the bonds of our affliction, and get weariness instead of expected ease? Until we are quiet with God, how can we hope that he should send us quietness? Thirdly, it is a foolish thing to strive with God, because by striving with him in reference to any misery that is upon us, we hinder ourselves from taking comfort in any remaining mercy. Though God takes away many mercies, yet while life remains, there is somewhat of mercy remaining. When Job was stripped to his skin, yet he has somewhat left, which was the ground of his blessing God. The greatest losers have somewhat left. They escape at least, as Job said he did at worst, chapter 19:20, with the skin of their teeth. But while we strive with God about the mercies we have lost, we lose the comfort of all the mercies we still enjoy. And is it not extreme folly to deprive ourselves of what we have by complaining about what we have not? Why do you strive? Thus much from the emphasis of the former part of the verse, as it is put into a chiding or reproving question. Why do you strive against him? From the latter branch, he gives not account of any of his manners. Observe first, the power and dominion of God is absolute. God is not subject to any reckonings with man, whatever he does. He that may do what he will and can do nothing but what is right, neither may nor can be brought to any account for what he has done. He that is unaccountable is absolute in power. Further, God needs not give man any account upon these three grounds. First, he owes no man anything. He has received nothing of us, and if a man has not received, he needs not account. They that have any trust from men are to give account. But what does God receive from man? Man receives his all from God. Why then should God give any account? Secondly, consider the Lord has wronged no man, nor can he. He is infinitely just and righteous in all his ways. He not only does just things, but things are just because he does them. Why should he give an account of any of his manners, who neither does nor can do any matter which is unjust? If we knew and were fully assured of a man in whose hands we have trusted much, that he were so just that he would not, though he had opportunity, deceive us a farthing, we would never call him to an account. And it is said of those treasurers in the story of the king, 2 Kings 12:15, they reckoned not with the men into whose hand they delivered the money to be bestowed on workmen, for they dealt faithfully. An example hardly to be paralleled in any age by the sons of men. Many are more desirous of trusts and careful to discharge them. They love to have much treasure pass through their hands, that some of it may in passage slip into their own pockets and purses. Justice and faithfulness are rare jewels among men, and therefore it is but need that they should have a check upon them and be called to an account. But the holy God is altogether just and faithful. Therefore, to what purpose should he be called to an account? Let us rest quiet in this acknowledgment, that he whose will is the highest reason can do nothing without reason. Man was created under God, and then he returns to the order of his creation when he prefers the judgment of God, even when he does not understand it before his own. Thirdly, there is no man, no nor angel that has any authority to call God to an account. They that are accountable to others are under their power, either as being in degree above them, or as having made a compact and covenant with them, though they're equals, to give them an account. But who shall call God to an account who is higher than the highest? And though God has condescended to make a covenant with man, and therein given him assurance that he will do him good, yet God has engaged himself to give us an account how, or in what way he makes good or performs his covenant. Man must give an account to God how he has performed the articles of the covenant, not God to man. As man is a frail, dying creature, so he is an accountable creature. Luke 16:2. Give an account of your stewardship, for you must be no longer steward. Romans 14:12. So then every one of us shall give an account of himself to God. God will call every man to a strict account of his receipts and expenses, what talents of time and opportunities of parts and abilities of power and authorities have been put into his hand, as also how he has husbanded and improved them. We also poor creatures, by striving with God, call him upon the manner to give us an account of his matters, and in the meantime forget the account which we must give to him of all our matters. It is our duty and will be our wisdom to account so with ourselves every day, that we may be ready for our account in that great and last audit day. And is to remember and prepare for our own account in that day will keep us from doing or saying anything which may be interpreted a calling of God to an account all our days. To that remembrance will make us strive how to improve and be bettered by the afflictions and troubles in which we are exercised in the world, instead of striving with God, because he puts us upon those several exercises. For how we have improved our affliction will be one part, and that a very considerable one, of our account to God in that day.